Guys, we live in a crazy time, especially if you're a parent. I happen to be a father, and so I'm extremely worried about the world that my children have to grow up in. And I take it upon myself to do everything I can to improve that world, as I know all of you who are parents do. My guest today is just the same, and he's actually trying to do something about it. He's built out a program called Fathering in a World Gone Mad. I think it's a huge benefit to society, and I was really excited to have him on to talk about his new program. This is Kelly Walker. You've seen him on my show before. He's the host of Real Freedom Talk and the proprietor, the creator, if you will, of the new program, Fathering in a World Gone Mad. So I had him on to talk about his efforts in that regard, as well as just catch up in general. I hope you guys enjoy this conversation. Without further ado, here's Kelly Walker. Let's get into it. Kelly Walker, welcome back to the show, brother.
Dave, great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, man. So a lot of my longtime listeners will be familiar with you because I've had you on the show once before. In that episode, we covered your background and your history and sort of what resulted in your rise to, I guess you would call it, public prominence, right? You stood up in the state of Arizona against the indoctrination of children in schools, and you stood for a lot of political causes that resulted in ramifications for you and your business and your family. And you were kind of forced into the public spotlight, so to speak. And ever since, you've been in the fight, I guess you would call it. And so a lot has transpired since then, one thing of which being you've moved to the great state of Tennessee now. So you're a lot closer to me, and we're going to have to get together in person. But
sure.
You're also doing something really cool. And this is what caused me to say, hey, man, come on the show because I want you to talk about this. I want you to share this with people. And that is basically a training program targeted at dads, but I'll let you take it further and describe what you got going on now.
Sure, you bet. It's almost cliche these days to say I wasn't very involved in politics before the lockdowns happened, but that was the case. And, I worked with a number of people who had various political views. And for a long time, you'd disagree with people, but that, you could go have a beer at the end of the day or something of that nature. But it's become so polarized. But I think what the lockdowns did is it woke so many of us up. So one thing I did know is our civil rights, what this country was founded upon. And I recognized the face of tyranny when it came. And one thing that these power-hungry people do not like is men who stand up, men who speak boldly. I was arrested twice simply for speaking and for apparently for being a large male, but it really highlights something our country and our culture has lost, and that is real manhood, and in particular, fathers. And it could be, literally fathers who have kids. It could be grandfathers. It could be men of an age where they can be in that role and help, because there are a lot of fatherless kids. There are a lot of boys needing role models, girls needing people to look up to. So from those beginnings, the tumultuous conflict that we had in our society, there are a number of people around the country, and you're one of them, Dave. We've gotten deeper into this fight and said, look, this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And what I realized is we're going to have to rebuild our nation from the ground up. It's going to have to be from the inside and out. We can do boycotts, protests, all the political things that happen on Capitol Hill. But ultimately, it depends on people like you and me, and it depends on people who are raising families in this country. So the series is called Fathering in a World Gone Mad. And it started out as 6 sessions with some remarkable men on different topics. It's grown to 8 because Stephen Davis and Anthony Watson from Turning Point USA said, hey, we want to get involved in this. And then Clay Clark from the Reawaken America tour, I saw him in Vegas, and he's done a session with us now. So it's up to 8, but it's not a specific event in time. What we're doing is we're getting together all of these talks on specific topics. We're putting them online. We're including workbooks. You might say, oh, my wife says don't use the word workbook, study guides. There we go. And a lot of extras. We're setting up a locals account where we can interact. And we're just going to keep moving this forward because we need so desperately good fathers in this nation. And we call the founders of this country our forefathers. And somehow the word father, the word man, the word masculine, they have all gotten this negative cast. And we need to make it positive again.
Yeah. I think a lot of that is sort of a spin-off of this demonization of Western society as being a patriarchy, right? And so naturally anything that's representative of masculinity, of a man, of a father, is demonized sort of de facto because of that. And something I do a lot of on this show is talk about the attack on masculinity. And I'm not talking about machismo, thump your chest, walk around like you're the baddest guy on the block. I'm talking about traditional masculinity, being a protector and a provider, and being strong for your family. And I had a gentleman on the show, Matt Boudreau, who co-founded the Apogee program with Tim Kennedy. And he talks about being a gentleman when you need to be, but a savage when you need to be. And I think that sums it up perfectly, right? Jordan Peterson talks about being a monster, but knowing how to tame it and let the monster out when need be. And so that's what we're talking about here. And that, in my opinion, makes a good dad. So, Barack Obama himself said it, right? He said, children of single family households do poorly downstream relative to children of two family households. And specifically, if you look at the data, households that are a single mother household versus households that are a single father household, right? The single mother households, and this isn't a dig at moms, I'm just putting it out there to illustrate the necessity of fathers. Single mother households do poorly relative to the success of the children later in life compared to single father households. So that just shows how important the dad is in a household. And I think that, you've said this in our conversations off the show, the family, the nuclear family, is the bedrock of this nation. It's the ultimate safeguard against control, against tyranny. And we are, I think, starting to see a revival of those values in our society. We're seeing young men who say, hey, man, I'm not interested in hookup culture. I want to find a good woman to marry and build a family with. And we have a lot of dads who are maybe later in life who are having a renaissance of sorts and saying, I want to be a better father. How do I do that? I've been led astray. How do I do that? So talk a little bit about who all you have on the show, how it can benefit these people, or the show, I guess the program, the course or seminar, you would call it, and what they'll get out of that. Because I think a lot of people are craving that, and it's needed right now, man.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I was a single father for 3 years. It's been years ago now. I've been remarried for just over 12 years, and I can tell you it's no fun being a single father either. And from either perspective, a child, the best environment they can grow up in is having two parents, learning from the masculine side and the feminine side. And
absolutely,
I'm very blessed to have that now. I have 3 children with my wife, Andrea, and we're bringing them up in a certain way that it's very stable for them. There's a sense, the word economy comes from the Greek word oikos, which is the word for home. And the economy, the future, the prosperity of our nation really depends on what's happening in the home. And that's why, you and I had talked previously about this isn't about politics. This series isn't. And yet, it's almost cliche to say I wasn't very involved in politics before the lockdowns, and I wasn't. But things have gotten so polarized. What we're seeing now is an attack on the very fabric of our nation. And I was talking to Boone Cutler the other day. He wrote 5GW with General Michael Flynn, and we talked about how this is going to be maybe sound tinfoil hat to some people, but I assure you it's very, very real. The Chinese Communist Party has been intent on destroying our country, and they've done that by sowing discord on the inside, by dividing us, by making our politics very polar. And focusing on this tribalism. And that's what Marxism and communism do. They divide, they break down, they destroy, so that it creates a vacuum where tyranny can come in. And one of the reasons they hate fathers is because we are strong. We are the backbone of the family. Now, I say that in all humility because obviously there's immense value with mothers. We don't need to have this either or. We don't need to have this competition.
It needs to be both.
It does. And, my dad gave me this book when I was it was a graduation gift from high school. It was called The Man of Steel and Velvet. There's the book by Stu Weber, Tender Warrior. It's that concept you're talking about where a man is soft on the outside, but has a backbone and has strength on the inside. So, normally with my kids, I'm very loving. They come up, they hug me, I kiss them, they sit on my lap. My younger kids, my older ones, not so much anymore, but I'm also capable of protecting my family. And there've come a few instances where that steel comes out. If somebody threatens my family's safety, my wife is really glad to have me there, and I know like a single mom can do it. A single dad could do it. I knew a single dad who his wife left. She went out and sowed her wild oats. He was left with the teenage kids. He worked nights cleaning the hospital so that he could be with them during the day. And he literally just got by on naps. And, fathers can have immense strength. But what we're wanting to do with the fathering series is not say, hey, look, fathers are better, women just don't have what it takes. Moms don't have what it takes. Not at all. We're looking at training up fathers to be great husbands, great providers. Single dads, we're going to be here to help you and support you because it takes a lot to raise kids. I know from experience it's hard to be a single dad. So I've brought together some very, very real people who've had a lot of experience in this area. And one that I just recently spoke with is Victor Marx. And you can tell when you're talking to Victor, he's suffered with PTSD from combat. He's had a lot of ups and downs. He's had some difficulties that he's navigated, but because of those difficulties, he's able to give some really good advice for fathers. And we talked about how we're not going to pretend like we're perfect. Like I could start this series and act as if, well, no, I didn't go through a divorce and all these other things. But like Victor said, the world is messy. So let me just go through the speakers real quick. So I'm the host, and I'm going to be taking a session on reconciling science and religion, because as a father, your kids, like my 11-year-old boy is already saying, like the other day, he said, mom wants me to pray, but how do I know if God really exists? And we've taught him about God his whole life, but he's already 11 years old asking that question and wanting to know. So I'm going to spend some time with him, and I'm going to take my book, Guidebook for a Son, which, by the way, comes free with the course. And we're going to read through the chapter together on origins of the universe. And we're going to talk about that. So that's something I've studied a lot. I have a bachelor's in theology and English and a master of science degree. And so I'm going to help provide fathers with a basis for saying, why are we here? How did we get here? There's actually, when you study enough and you look into it, there is no major conflict between pure science and theology. So I'm going to host that. Eric Metaxas is going to come on and talk about the purpose and meaning of suffering and evil in the world, because this is a question your kids are going to have to know. If there's a God, why do kids die of cancer, and so on and so forth. Victor Marx, as I said, we already filmed this and it's up on the series now. It's Love, Marriage, and Sex. We had a great talk there. Sheriff Mark Lamb, same. We already did that talk, and he's talking about self-defense and protection, how to defend yourself, how to deal with adversity, and how to be safe in this ever increasingly more dangerous world. Clay Clark, we talked, and he's going to talk about preparing your kids for financial success. Dave Scarlett from His Glory Ministries is going to talk about helping us lead our children to find God, to discover where they came from, who God is. And then Stephen Davis and Anthony Watson from Turning Point USA, they got wind of this series, and they said, "Hey, we want to be a part of this," because I had each of them on my Freedom Talk show. And so Anthony is unmarried; he doesn't have kids. And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." He said, "Well, how can I be a part of this when I'm not a dad?" I said, "Why don't we do a bonus session on building a godly foundation? So if you want to be a dad, or even if you are a dad and you want to be a better dad,
Yeah.
uh, there's some principles there." And man, that's a fantastic episode that these two did. It's very lively, and I'm just amazed at these young men. They have such wisdom, and they work with young people. That's part of their job for Turning Point. And then I'm glad to say we have one on finding your place in history, and that one's led by none other than Teddy Roosevelt. You say, what? Teddy Roosevelt? Well, yeah, it's actually Joe Weigand. He's a world famous Teddy Roosevelt character actor. He looks, he sounds like him. He knows Teddy Roosevelt inside and out. And I actually had brought my older kids to see him long ago and reconnected with him. And he's very, very passionate. And I'm excited to bring him on. So that'll be fun. He'll be in character the whole time. So we've got these 8 presentations, you might say, and then we have a study guide that goes with that. We started a locals group where we're going to provide ongoing support and conversation for fathers. And we're looking at possibly and probably this could lead to some in-person events, maybe even fathering retreats. So I'm very excited about it. These days, unfortunately, everything's political, but I look at politics not as parties, but people who want a stable society, who tend to get along with their neighbors, who, to whom color doesn't make a big difference, who aren't going to go tribal, and then just these far left neo-Marxist people who are causing a lot of grief for everyone. So this series isn't about politics. Inevitably, some of that's going to come around. It's just the nature of where we are today. But Dave, I want to thank you for coming in and being a part of this. I'm excited to have you as a part of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. I'm excited myself. And I think that's an important point, is that although you have been a figure in political life and political discourse, and a lot of what you've done has been political, this program is not intrinsically political. Now, it may be that if you hold certain familial values and beliefs that you fall on a particular political side, but this is for anyone who wants to be a good dad, anyone who's looking for guidance and direction in how to navigate the waters of fatherhood. And I just think that's important, because unfortunately, as you say, everything ends up political in some capacity these days. And when you start to talk about the importance of a father, you're immediately labeled as being on the right. And that is definitely true. But I think that, and this is interesting. There was a viral clip going around several weeks back, and it was this young woman saying, and she was frustrated. She was frustrated with the dating world. She was trying to find a man, and she was saying, I want a man who is strong and masculine, yet compassionate and caring, and can protect me and provide and fill all of those traditionally masculine values, but I don't want him to be a conservative or a Republican. So she was essentially looking for a liberal or left-leaning, strong masculine man. And of course, the comments, as you can imagine, were people saying, yeah, good luck, that doesn't exist, and a bunch of things to that effect. And I just want to highlight that, because it is important in that most women, no matter what political affiliation they have, are generally looking for those attributes in a man. And so again, this doesn't have to be a political thing. In fact, it's not. It's just getting at the core of embracing those things that make you a good husband, father, and man in general, right?
Yeah, for sure. And women and people on the liberal side of the spectrum have been sold a lie, that this toxic masculinity lie. And I flipped that, and I'm including some articles I've written in this series. I'm going to add them right to the lessons, but I talk about tonic masculinity. It's a tonic, it's a cure, it's exactly what our society needs. And a real man, a tonic masculine man, or as I say in Guidebook for a Son, the total man, is really a delight. It's somebody that you would want to be around, because maybe this young lady on this video, she's been told that, well, conservative men are these knuckle dragging bigots who sit around and belch and tell their wife to make them a sandwich and get them a beer. Real
Right.
men aren't like that. That's a parody of manhood. And any real man that you meet that's truly masculine looks at those as man boys. They haven't grown up, because a real man is capable of tenderness. A real man watches out for his family. He's concerned, but believe you me, he has that steel. And most women, if not all, want that strength, even if they're given a straw man version of what masculinity is. Deep inside, they want that, because if in the middle of the night someone's trying to break down your door, do you want an effeminate man who's going to hide behind you and go running out the back door? Or do you want a man who's going to stand up and put his life on the line for you? I mean, which do you want? And that's a very positive attribute that men have. So this society has tried to break down men. But if you look at my arm here, and I'm not doing the Sig Heil here, so don't take this out of context, but if my arm is human history, mankind, womankind, personkind, whatever, mankind's presence on the earth, this woke revolution, this Marxist revolution would be the fingernail. And I don't even have very long fingernails. This whole ideology is so new, and it goes up against thousands of years of collected human wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And it's trying to say, look, we're woke, we're awake, you guys need to follow us. Well, no, we don't, because the burden of proof is on you, and you're failing, because look at the fruits of what this has done to our society. It's produced, like I say, a world gone mad. We're more divided than ever. Men, like you say, are committing suicide at high rates. A lot of women are frustrated. They can't find real men. The dating scene, from what I understand, is horrid. So we need this renaissance. We need to go back to that collected wisdom, but also be learning and saying, look, the Harvey Weinsteins, the Matt Lauers, that type, Bill Cosby's, these aren't men. This isn't what manhood is. And I wrote an article, weakness is not a virtue. And being a weak male, a beta male, as they say, that's not where it's at. We need to step into that manhood and be men, be strong. But also, there are stereotypes about men. I read an article, I'm trying to remember which publication it was, but I also wrote a rebuttal to that. And this article, point by point, was saying what a toxic masculine man is. And it said just ridiculous things. Again, it set up straw man arguments like, we don't show our emotions. Well, who says? Right. I mean, men cry. I like my eyeballs sweat sometimes. I've been chopping onions, no, but
yeah. Well, that's important though, Kelly, because I think oftentimes when we hear that, when we hear emotions, we immediately sort of attach that to what you just said, like men cry. And yes, that's true. Men cry, but there's an entire spectrum of emotion. And I think something that's important for people to understand is, a lot of this rhetoric is, again, you said it, we have centuries, millennia of collective human wisdom and living in a certain way. And men and women are just different. And so when you try to say men don't show emotion, that's incorrect. Men don't show emotion in the way that women show emotion.
Right.
I mean, look, even if you want to take the douchebag guy that you just described earlier, who sits around and belches and is rude and whatever, however you described it, or the guy who's at the bar acting like he's a big shot, puffing his chest out or whatever. All of that is actually manifestation of different emotions. I mean, we are emotional creatures. I think the important thing to understand is, anger is an emotion. And they try to say that, toxic masculine men are just angry and aggressive. Well, if you're going to say that, you can't say that men don't show emotion, because that's a contradictory statement. I think the important thing is to realize that we do show emotions. We process emotions and display them differently than women. So I think a lot of this rhetoric comes, again, from trying to sort of impose the framework of how women display emotion onto men. And that's just not the case. I mean, we are very different creatures. And, You know,
Absolutely.
I saw an article very similar. Maybe it was the same as the one you're referring to, where a toxic masculine trait that was brought up was stoicism, essentially, you know, being stoic in the face of adversity. And it's like, look, man, if you don't want a guy who can hold it together when stuff's going down, you know, I would rethink that, right? So I think a lot of this is, again, saying men need to behave the same way women do, and that's just as wrong as saying women should behave the same
Absolutely.
way as men, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Emotions make great servants, but terrible masters, as they say.
Yes.
And so, I'm not going to react the same way a woman is, and I'm going to teach my sons differently than my daughters. So, for instance, my sons who are older now, and I do the same with my two who are younger, because I have five total. They would fall and skin their knee on their bike, and they'd be lying there crying, and oh, carry my bike home. I can't walk. All those things that the kids do. And first of all, I check to make sure they're okay, and it's just a skinned knee, and I comfort them, and then I say, okay, now get back up on the bike and ride. Oh no, but it hurts. I know, but get back up on the bike and ride. I'm not carrying your bike home. And I had that uh, experience with my now oldest son, now grown oldest son, and he was going through a training to be a in the corrections officer, and he was having a hard time, and it was rough, and they put him through the paces, and he came home. He was very upset. He was very emotional, and I said, "Come on, son, you can do this." And I said, "You remember what I told you when you were riding your bike?" And he started tearing up, and he said, "Yeah, get back up on the bike." And he said, "I can do this. I can do this." So um, what we don't want as men is to, shed tears because somebody offends us, because
Hmm.
somebody says something mean, because we have to be a stalwart. So when things get rough, when the work isn't there, and you've got to figure out how to pay the bills, or your family, the car breaks down, and you've got to get your family to safety, all of these things, we do need to have that stoicism, but it doesn't mean we're uh, emotional brick walls. We have those emotions, but what we do as men is we channel that in our sons, we channel it in our daughters. And it's not to say I'm not training my daughter to be strong, but it's different.
Right.
And when my sons, if they really hurt themselves, bang their knee or whatever, um, they're learning to suck it up a little bit. But if they really get hurt or they're sick, yeah, I understand that. 10-year-old boy's gonna cry if he's just been vomiting or something. My daughter can cry because she gets her feelings hurt, or because uh, one of her brothers wants to shoot a bird with a BB gun or something. No, no, don't do that. They're just very, very different.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I have to parent them differently. But one thing I don't ever want them to see is that, hey, dad never shows any emotions. I do. And in fact, I'll apologize to my kids if I'm gruff, if I'm grumpy, and I you know I yell at them, quiet down, kids, or whatever. I'll go back and say, I'm sorry, dad. Dad was tired, and I got grumpy, and I love you guys, and give them hugs. So, like I say, a real man is just a delight. Um, but he's a man, and my kids also know there are certain lines they don't cross. So, I'm sure you've seen this, Dave. Like, um, my kids can be with their mom all day long, and I'm working, and then at the end of the day, we kind of do an accounting, and it's a little bit of a fearful thing to tell your dad you misbehaved that day, because
Hmm.
there's just a certain strength there and a certain authority that you have, and if it's channeled right, it's a good thing. I mean, what mom wouldn't want a man with virtue and tenderness and strength, who's going to back her up and be there, and she could say, yeah, you sassed me, now go talk to your dad, and your dad will set you straight, in
Yeah.
a loving way, not in an abusive way.
Yeah. And look, it's just an intrinsic aspect of human nature, right? I have a 6-year-old daughter. She's a great kid. I mean, the best kid. I can't stress that enough. But obviously, kids and parents butt heads occasionally, and kids act out. And it's very different when it occurs with her mom and my wife. I mean, I'm sure you've seen my wife on my social media,
Mhm.
etc. She is the most kind, caring, amazing woman, you know, this beautiful, smaller woman. And I mean, look at me, right? I'm the exact opposite of that. So it's all I have to do. And I can probably count on one hand the number of times in this live that I've had to actually raise my voice. And I'm just talking slightly raise my voice. And a lot of that oftentimes is because she's about to do something that will get her hurt. And so it's a natural reaction to be like, hey,
Yeah.
Carter, stop, that kind of thing. But that's all it takes for me is if she's acting out to her mother, all I have to do is say, Carter, and it's a completely different reaction. And
Yeah.
I've never lifted a finger towards her, nothing like that, but it's just the effect that my presence has on
Yes.
the disciplinary process with a
Mhm.
child. And it's like, that's all it takes, right? And I'll say, hey, don't talk to your mom that way. Yes, daddy, sorry. It's just different. And I'm not saying she's disrespectful to her mom in general or anything like that, but it's just a different thing. A father brings that sense of strength and discipline. And like you said, you got to have a reckoning at the end of the day with dad about how you acted out with mom. Those kids fear that interaction. And it's just a natural dynamic in the family. And
Yeah.
it's just, and I think a lot of this is why you see the results you see with single parent households and the father not being present. Oftentimes, if those children aren't taught how to conduct themselves in a disciplined manner and not act out, they're going to do it later in life as adults. And that's why
Yeah.
the incarceration rate for children raised in single family homes is just through the roof, et cetera. And so it's just a fact of nature, man.
Yeah, it sure is, and it's inherent in children's nature to challenge, to see what those boundaries are, and it's good. And healthy parents need to set certain boundaries, and every kid's going to be different. Like my two oldest sons, all I had to do was give them a look, and they'd stop. These three youngest ones, I mean, they're wonderful. They're great kids, but they're also very energetic, very brilliant, and not one of them has a demure personality. My
Mm,
oldest of the three kids is a bit more toward the melancholic side. He's a little shy when he meets people, but they are intensely curious about the world. They're very intelligent. So it doesn't necessarily work just to give them a look. And now there's three of them. We're outnumbered, and sometimes I have to raise my voice to get their attention. And it's not that they're not as well behaved as the first two kids. They're just different,
yeah.
But to your point, we're seeing the fruits of cutting the fathers in a lot of cases intentionally cutting the fathers out of families because nobody likes having their kids go to school with those other kids who are just going to lose all restraint, like the video of the trans kid who pulled the girl's hair, pulled her down on the floor and started punching her. And I've seen people try to justify that. There's no justification for that. I don't care if that girl had said something unkind to this other kid or what. That is a lack of self-control. And honestly, a good father is needed in this kind of situation to say, look, you don't, I don't care what that person said to you. You don't pull their hair and slam them to the ground and punch them in the face. And the problem is when they don't have that strong fatherly presence, and I could just about bet you that's the case in that situation. If you don't have that fatherly presence, these people grow up and they end up doing things like we see with these young adults in Antifa going out and burning cities and looting. It's a lack of good fatherhood. Now I say that with a caveat because you can be the best father in the world and kids are going to make their own decisions. So some really, really good parents can have kids that turn out and they go sow their wild oats, or they even go into choose evil, and that's really unfortunate. But the chances are, if you're a good, dedicated parent, you're there, you're caring, you're loving, your kids know that you love them. They may go off on and sow their wild oats. Some will, some won't. But ultimately, you're going to set them up for success, and it's going to be a real gift to society. So when I talk about tonic masculinity, it's not only centered at the man. Look, I look at it this way, Dave. Like I'm raising four young men because I want them someday to be fantastic husbands, fantastic providers. I want them to be great fathers for my grandkids. You know, I'm raising a daughter who's going to have the courage and the strength and the sense of knowing that she's fully loved, to where, you know, dingbat teenage boys aren't going to get her into bed, because she's going to value who she is. And she's
Yes.
going to understand that, hey, I'm a treasure that's worth guarding, you know? And
Yeah.
so, like, for my daughter, I hug her, I love her, I tell her how beautiful she is. I'm her first crush, you know, I'm her first love. And but eventually, you know, we have to move our kids in that direction, work with their personalities, work with their interests, and get them to that point where they're ready to go out on their own. So
Yeah.
someday, you know, my daughter's going to meet a great young man, and they're going to decide they want to be married. But I want her to be so whole that she's saying, I want this man in my life, not I need him, or I have some unfulfilled love. So the importance of fathers is just incredible. And it just pains me to see this war on men and war on fathers. But frankly, fathers like you, fathers like these gentlemen that are part of this series, there are men out there who need to model themselves after these people, because maybe they didn't have a good upbringing. Maybe they have problems where they're turning to alcohol, or they're doing immature things, or they're watching people online that are bad influences, or they're not, you know, struggling with being faithful in their marriages. They need
Yeah.
role models to look up to, and
Yeah.
we
You
have
know,
some ones.
right. And this is an important point that I just want to expand on, because you talk about the importance of role models and modeling in general, right? Because I've said this before, there's a trope, do as I say, not as I do. And I say that that's a cop out that parents who don't live the example for their children like to use, right? Yeah, I do it this way, but I'm telling you, you need to do it that way, right? Children learn so much more from observing what we do
Yeah.
than listening to what we say. And so I just want to hammer home the importance of, and you mentioned your daughter and eventually finding a good husband one day. And as the father of soon to be two daughters, that's very important to me. And can you talk a little bit about, because another important aspect of all of this is that when you're in a marriage, a two-parent household raising children, it's very important that the husband show the children in his relationship with their mother. So, in other words, how I treat her mother sets the standard for what she's going to look for and how a man treats her.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
I openly show my wife affection in front of our child. I praise her. I call her beautiful. We
Absolutely.
all of this is so very important because, as you just said, you're the first example of a man in that young girl's life, right? So all other men will be compared, whether you like it or not, dads, they're going to be compared to the standard of their father. And so it's so important for you to exemplify what is a good marriage, what is a good relationship to your children, so that they then carry that on in life, right?
Right. Exactly. And that's one of the main things we want to do with this series, because you become a parent, you're not handed a guidebook. And that's why I originally wrote Guidebook for a Son. And I said Guidebook for a Son because I only had boys at the time, but
Mm,
really it's a parenting manual. But what we're doing with this series is not only pushing out information, but interacting and growing this idea that you're going to have some people that you can look to that are going to help you through this journey, help you avoid some pitfalls, but also develop your character, develop your goodness as a father. Because look, the next generation is the one that's going to determine the fate of this nation. And so far,
mhm,
it's not going great. I mean,
mm. Yeah.
we have some wonderful people. Riley Gaines is 23. She's become a good friend, but she's the age of my oldest son. I'm talking later this week with Hannah Faulkner, who's a 16-year-old girl. She's a great speaker, wonderful young lady. There are some great young people out there in these generations, but it's also a generation that's under attack like I've never seen before. The ideologies that are being thrown at them are absolutely incredibly destructive. I've talked to Chloe Cole on a number of occasions. She's the
Mm,
young detransitioner. Her parents were told, do you want a living son or a dead daughter?" Uh, they were sold a bill of goods, and she realized, I've made a huge mistake. I've gotten these radical surgeries. I actually am a woman, And she goes across the country warning people, not telling them what to decide in their lives, but just say, look, be very careful with this. And she gets hate thrown at her. She gets a lot of, death threats and everything else. So not only are young people given poor models and having ideologies thrown at them, it's to the point of violence. And you're seeing that. So these young people are going to face challenges that I didn't have to growing up, that my parents didn't have to face. And like, I don't even want to have to explain to my kids about transgenderism or the idea that, supposedly you can change your gender. That's something I would never even want my kids to have in their heads. And yet I have to approach it with them because they're peers. Already, one of my kids came home saying, well, so-and-so says there's this many genders. And I said, so we sat down and have a talk. So one of the things that we're doing through the series is we're taking on some of these issues that could only happen in a world gone mad, that could only happen when our society has slid so far that these values and virtues that have gone across time and across cultures and been known as wisdom in virtually every country, every society, when they're under attack. And we're saying, here's how we respond to this. Here's how we survive this with our families intact and our kids not falling into some very, very dark places. Because now it's not just like in my time, like, don't smoke pot or something. It's kids being allowed to make decisions that are going to affect them for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, now it's don't chop off your genitals. It's gotten pretty serious, and I actually want to expand on that a little more because you aptly named it "Fathering in a World Gone Mad," and I think there's a lot to that, right? Because the world truly has gone mad, and you mentioned just briefly there, you often see a lot of these sort of archetypes through history where towards the end of great civilizations there is this obsession with gender and gender fluidity and a lot of disturbing parallels occurring. And of course there's this viral Roman Empire thing going around. How often do men think about the Roman Empire? And it's funny, my wife asked me that because I guess some ladies at work were talking about it, and I was like, well, to be honest, and I'm not trying to play into the trope here, but I think about the Roman Empire at least weekly because I think about the parallels to our current empire and a lot of the things that we're seeing in this world gone mad that they say history doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but it rhymes. And I think we're in a moment that is a potential inflection point. If we're lucky, it's an inflection point, meaning that it will reverse, but it's rhyming in a big way with things that have happened in the past to great civilization. So, and the father, the family is the answer to that, right? So I guess expand a little more on that in the response of a good dad to a world gone mad. Like, what is your role in that?
Yeah,
as the dad?
Well, in the world of science and natural history, there was an event called the Cambrian explosion.
Yeah.
And what we see in the fossil record is that all the forms of everything that's living today, and we're talking a long period of time relative to us, but in the geological record, pretty quickly, we had all the forms and body patterns for every creature we see today, essentially. And it's the same with history. And that's why we think about the Roman Empire all the time, because socially, politically, in every other respect, King Solomon said, there's nothing new under the sun. The Roman Empire went through all the phases, and they didn't have the technology that we do. But, the early Republic, they talked about virtue. And even after the Republic, people like Marcus Aurelius tried to bring back Stoicism and virtue and these ideas. But ultimately, the Roman Empire fell because it crumbled from inside. Virtue went by the wayside. Pedophilia started gaining a foothold. You went from these masculine Greco-Roman statues to just, these androgynous. So it's all there. The pattern's there. So in essence, this is kind of giving us a guide of where we go. So, and I think that's why we think about the Roman Empire so much. One of the reasons, because we can look and say, where does this pattern lead? And we know where we are in this progression. We also can look at communism. We can look at how did Russia get into Marxism and eventually have the gulags. And I like to say, at first in the Russian Revolution, in the Communist Revolution, they legalized abortion, they legalized homosexuality, and everybody thought this is great, and the morals went away. But as soon as they really got power under Stalin, they made those things illegal again, and then started persecuting those people. So people today who think, oh yeah, the left loves me, these revolutionaries, they're a means to an end. Okay, and I know I'm digressing a little bit here, but what's really going to help us is to hold on to those core values that are the strength of a nation, and to put those principles back into our society. Because unless we want to go the way of the Roman Empire, unless we want to go the way that the Russian Revolution, the Communist Revolution took the Soviet Union, we call our society, a society like this, degenerate. And it's based on the word generate or genesis or create. The left doesn't create anything; they only break down. They degenerate, they uncreate things. What we want to do is build things back up. Virtue brings positive things into society. Look at what the left does. They're only breaking things down. And they started with women's rights, talking about misogyny, talking about feminism. And now we literally have biological men my size, like Riley talked about, this guy who
Leah Thomas,
yeah. And you look at pictures, and like I have some pictures with Riley, and she's down here, and I'm heavier than Leah, but I'm the same height. There's men competing women in beauty contests and everything, and so suddenly all order breaks down, and it's society just falls apart. What we have to do is we have to get back to the family. We have to get fathers back into their place. And Dave, I like to say there's a war on men, but that's okay. We're men. We can take it. So we're going to need some strong men. I mean, true strength. Did I answer your question? I know I wandered there a little bit.
No. That's a good answer. I wanted to just talk a little more in general about this world we're in that has gone mad. And I think you did a good job at creating parallels to historical archetypes, for lack of a better way of putting it, but just things that have happened over and over again. And, one thing that I was thinking as you described all of that sort of exacerbated the degeneration of society is social media, right? This is a new variable that was never present before, and never in the history of humankind has an individual interacted with thousands upon thousands upon thousands of other humans. That's not how we're wired, right? It used to be your family and then your village or community, right? And that was the extent of it, except for maybe some interactions with neighboring villages for trade or what have you. But that was it. There are a lot of studies about this, and there's kind of, 10 core people you interact with at most, then sort of extended family, and then those that you associate with in your community. And it's like max 100 people, right? But now social media, I mean, on Instagram, I have over 90,000 followers, and it's like never in the history of the world could I make a statement and then get feedback from thousands of people, oftentimes negative, a lot of supportive. But this is just a new phenomenon that we're encountering as the human race. And I think a lot of us, most of us, all of us, probably in some capacity, are ill prepared to deal with that, right? The rapid spread of information, the rapid magnitude of criticism that you get at a large scale, and then the spreading of a lot of these ideas that have contributed to the breakdown of the family, right? So from your perspective, what is the effect of social media and the role of the father at mitigating some of those negative effects of social media? I mean, you're a father of 5, presumably you've had to deal with it. My kids aren't old enough yet, right? So I'm interested to hear your perspective on that, because a lot of dads, especially, but parents in general, are like, how the heck do I navigate this crazy landscape of connectivity that I find my children being plopped into, where now and it's certainly contributed to depression and anxiety amongst young women, right? So talk a little bit about that, because in my view, it's a crazy world gone mad online as well.
Yeah, yeah, it is, and this is why, uh, very realistically, and I've worked with anti-communist party Chinese dissidents. I've written about it. This is why the Chinese Communist Party employs thousands and thousands of people and pays them $50 a day to go in, and some of those mean comments you're getting, or divisive, or nasty comments you're getting, are somebody sitting in a room who is tasked with creating that division and breaking down society, breaking down your sense of self. And unfortunately, like the Greek story, the myth of Narcissus, we're in love with our own image. So I sometimes think of an ape finding a shiny object and just looking at it, But what I'm getting at here is we have to untether from our phones. They're a good tool. We can use them. Obviously, one of the benefits is we could do a series like this and reach a huge number of people.
Right.
But like I was discussing with Boone Cutler the other day, he's written this guide for citizens to counter this, what they call fifth generation warfare, this psychological warfare being thrown at us all the time, designed to break us down. We have to start meeting in person. We have to get together. We have to restore that sense of local community. And now virtually with this, that's one thing we're going to do. I'm going to be available. I'd love for you to be available to where we can talk with fathers like you and I are talking here. But ultimately, we have to get to know our neighbors. We have to meet with people of like minds. I like something that's happening. Years and years ago, I didn't like the whole homeschooling idea because it seemed like this was sort of escapism, and we're just gonna, we're gonna do our little thing and kind of shelter our kids from the world. But one of the benefits, one of the positive things from the lockdowns is more and more people are doing that now, because they have seen that the schools have become communist indoctrination centers, literally. But now we have more people in the community saying, hey, I'm gonna meet with this person and their kids. And so there's a reaction to this that I think is positive, because we are in that social media sphere, and believe me, you can look at the studies. There are a lot of negative things about it, but one of the positive things is that we're saying, okay, it's time for us to get together in person. One thing that really concerns me, Dave, for kids is, like, when I was in junior high, I was the new kid. We had moved from Oregon to Minnesota. I was socially awkward. I was the new kid. I had my share of getting picked on at school and things like that. But then I could go home and it was my safe haven. Now kids, if they stand out, if they're in an awkward phase of their lives, they don't get to escape from that, because they could be at home after dinner, turn on their phone, and somebody's posting pictures about them, or memes or something like that. Is very, very concerning. So really, honestly, the answer to this social media miasma, this destructive force that it can be, is set some limits on that and get out and really interface with people. We send the kids outside all the time to play. They want the screens. We give them some game time, but we find that, oh, I'm bored. Well, go out and find something to do. And sure enough, they do. And it's really good to see in neighborhoods where kids are playing together. They're playing hide and seek. We get our kids involved in nature activities. But I think, Dave, we have to be very, very purposeful. And a lot of us have done it. You have that toddler and you have an appointment, something where you need to keep them occupied. You hand them a phone, you hand them a tablet. You see it all the time. But it's a big trade-off. We need to start handing them books or coloring books, or, I think giving them some time, but we have to be very, 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 very careful about not only social media for our kids, but for ourselves. Like,
yes,
my wife talks a lot about, she's an incredible baker. She's run a coffee shop. She does some amazing things, but sometimes she gets into this thing of comparing herself. Well, because a lot of people are going to put this perfect picture, perfect image of themselves out there. So, so I think being real, getting involved with your community, join a church, join a club, get out and get to know your neighbors. That's going to be very helpful.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of what you said is why we have seen this sort of groundswell of interest in the podcasting genre specifically because people are starved for long form interaction. I've told guests on my show in the past that doing the podcast is an absolute delight and it's something I look forward to every time I have one scheduled, if not just for the simple fact that how often otherwise do we get a chance as humans to sit down face to face? And I know this is virtual, but to sit down face to face, have a long conversation without looking at your phone or being distracted by something else. And I think that's why, and a number of other reasons, but that's why you've seen this massive interest in guys like Joe Rogan, because he'll just sit down, talk to someone for 3 hours, right?
Yeah.
Some of my fondest memories as a young man were sitting up late at night talking to my grandparents just about their lives, right? And just going fishing. I would go fishing all the time overnight because I grew up at the beach, and so we did a lot of shark fishing, and just standing there all night talking to grown men about life, just guys on the fishing pier that I came to know as a kid who was always out there because I loved fishing. But I would just have, and this was before social media and everything, obviously, but just these long conversations. And I have so many memories of value and insight that I gained from talking to those men. Right. And myself as basically a fatherless young boy, I was looking for strong male figures in my life. And so I think that fostering that as a dad for our children, right? That long form conversation and interaction without distractions. And I do have to say, I've checked my phone a few times. I'm not trying to be rude, but I have a wife who's 9 months pregnant. So that's the only reason I'm checking.
No,
Forgive me for that. But
no
I think that's a big part of it, man, is where, think about just historically sitting around the campfire, right? Talking to people in your village, right? It's a part of who we are. It's a part of human nature. This 10-second clip, 15-second clip, sound bite, this, TikTok, that, like boom, 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 boom. We're not designed for that.
Right. You're absolutely right. People used to sit around fires and pass, the Odyssey and the Iliad were passed on orally from Homer for
Right.
years, and
Yeah.
that's why a lot of ancient literature is in poetic form, because people memorized it and recited it over the campfire, you might say. But my first tagline for my Freedom Talk show was "Think Again" or "Think Again," because we do need to be learning to think again. And I've resisted that temptation. Some people have said sometimes, "Well, Kelly, your average show's about an hour. You should shorten it. You should do the little clips, and we'll do the reels and little short bites." But I've resisted that impulse to try to get my main audience off of Instagram. I'm on it. I'm active. But people have said, you can get a lot more followers if you just shorten it up. But it's like, no, I'm very purposely keeping it a little bit longer, because we do need that attention span, and we need to be able to think through issues and think through them deeply. And one of the problems we have is that people will see little memes and little snippets and form a whole worldview based on that, or a whole reality based on that. But we do need to have these conversations. You're absolutely right. We need some meaning and depth back in life, and it's hard for me too, Dave, because like we're all assaulted with so much information and so many choices of shows we can watch and things. But I find that people have time for very trivial things, or listening to people who don't have the best values and morals. And I just want to encourage you, if you're watching this show right now, go to realfreedomtalk.com, look at the fathering series. I'm so glad Dave's becoming a part of this. But tell people about it, tell them about it, and get involved, because it's not a short course. You're not going to get a 1 hour webinar with 10 tips on being a good father. It's going to be a conversation.
Yeah.
And nobody can give you ironclad tips that are absolute. Fathering is an art. It can vary depending on the kids you have, your situation. There are some fundamental core principles that we're going to discuss, things that apply to everyone. We call these, moral values or virtues. But it's a living thing. And like I said, Dave, my experience fathering my first two boys is different than these three younger kids. And your daughter, your 6-year-old daughter, she's very, very precious, by the way. I've seen her in pictures.
Thank you.
Your next daughter could have a completely different temperament, and probably will. So if you try to apply how you parent this daughter to the next daughter, it's probably not going to work quite as well, because they're all different.
Yeah,
I
agree.
think that's a great point you make, and we have to be very selective in what we choose to watch, what we give our time to, and watch things that are going to build us up as a person. I like the fail videos and everything else, and I find they're funny. It's mind candy, but ultimately I got to have some things in my life. Like you and I talking here is great. It's iron sharpens iron.
So
that's a really good point you make there, Dave.
I like that analogy. It's mind candy. It really is. The difference is what we're doing right now. This is a juicy ribeye that's going to nourish your mind, much as a nice steak will nourish your body, right? Mm-hmm. Fail videos, short clips, stimulating dopamine, dumps. That is junk food for your brain. And I think that just as we are cognizant of what we put in our body, right? As any health-minded individual would say, you should be aware and cognizant of that. Just as important, if not more important, you need to be cognizant of what you put in your brain, what you allow your mind to consume. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a great analogy and a great point, man. And we are a society, and I'm talking the Western world, but specifically America. We're a society that loves junk food. And I'm talking real junk food, but also junk food for the mind. And we've got to get away from that, in my opinion.
Yeah. Let me go get something real quick, because I want to that point. 1 second. So with this fathering series, you're actually going to be doing some reading. And at some point, you're going to get an ebook guidebook first, then you're going to get a digital version. But right now, when you sign up, you're actually going to get the hard copy book. I'm going to give you an autographed copy. So right now for $99, you can have access to the whole series. You get an autographed book, all the follow-up, the work. I keep saying workbooks, study guides. So it's something where you're going to need to apply yourself, and it's going to start getting you into better habits. It's not a long book. It's, what is it? It's a couple hundred pages, short chapters, good information. It's meant to be interactive too. It's not meant to be like, this is the be all and end all. It's designed to get you thinking. And if you disagree with some things in the book, great. Mm-hmm. But it is going to have a real book that you can highlight, that you can take notes in. It's going to have the follow-up exercises, and it's going to have dialogue. So this isn't something where you're going to say, well, I'm going to put down $99 and just watch something and be done. And boy, that was nice. This is something that I want people to incorporate into their lives and interact with, and even, grow and learn myself from it. And I know you will too. Everybody who's involved in this is going to grow. So I want it to become a community of fathers who are going to get through this all together and rebuild our nation from the inside out.
Yeah, man. Well, look, bro, I love what you're doing. I wanted you to come on just so we could talk about it, because I want to get this message out to my listeners, because I know a lot of men listen to the show, and there are a lot of men who need this. So I respect what you're doing. I think it is imperative in our world gone mad, to use your vernacular. But my hope is that some of you listening, many of you listening, will spend the money to join this. I'm a part of it. I love the fact that, Kelly, you're building a community around it. I think that's also something that men crave in our modern era, is community, is camaraderie with men who share the same values, with men who are all working to better themselves, become better husbands, fathers, protectors, providers. So let me put it up on the screen one more time for those watching. It's realfreedomtalk.com, and then you can sign up for the Fathering in a World Gone Mad. You'll see it at the top, I think to the right. There's a tab for it. You just click on that, and you can participate in this program. Kelly, man, I really appreciate your time. I know you're a busy guy and you got a lot going on, but thank you for all you do, man. And I'll leave it to you for any last words before we wrap this sucker up.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to say, this is a homegrown effort. I'm putting in a lot of the sweat equity myself, but we've had Turning Point USA take some interest, and His Glory Ministries, who I just met at in Las Vegas at a Reawaken America tour, and others are taking interest. But the most important part is anybody and everybody who signs up for this is going to help us produce this, but also keep this moving forward. So you're not only getting one heck of a program, you're helping us. And so we're not going out saying, donate to this cause and, here's our Give, Send, Go address, but you're actually sowing into something that's going to help us grow this. And by the way, I should mention, just as of last week, Give, Send, Go actually is our title sponsor for this event. So
nice.
If you're doing GoFundMe, I really encourage you to look at Give, Send, Go, because they are people with American values. They respect people's religious views, Christianity, belief in a higher power, having your own opinions. They're not going to censor you. They're not going to take down your account or send the money back to your donors because you disagree with them. So I have a lot of respect for Give, Send, Go, and I just want to thank them absolutely, Heather and crew, for getting behind this. We're also we're looking for more sponsors. If you'd like to sponsor, we're going to put you up on the screen, involve you, get your message out. So thanks to Give, Send, Go, and thanks to all of you who are going to sign up for this. We're really looking forward to talking with you. Dave, thank you for being a part of this. It's going to be great, and we'll definitely have to get together in person before too long.
Absolutely, brother. Besides the website, social media, where can people go to find you? I want to make sure we get all your information out there and people know exactly where they need to go.
You bet. On Instagram and Twitter, it's at Real Freedom Talk. Excuse me. On Instagram and Twitter, it's at Real Freedom Talk. And we're on Truth and Getter and some of the others as well. Really, if you go to realfreedomtalk.com, that's the hub for everything. You can also go to Linktree/Real Freedom Talk.
Okay.
And find everything. There's a lot of resources there, a lot of articles. There's past shows we've done, and give us a follow on social media. We'd love it.
Right on. Kelly Walker, thanks so much for your time, brother. I'm looking forward to seeing this grow and seeing the positive impact that you're going to have on tons of men and fathers. And for all you listening, I love you. And as always, keep your minds free.